Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Liz Fernandez, and I am the NYSAIS Job Fair Administrator. I have been affiliated with this program, with this event for 22 years. I am super proud of the ways in which we've supported increasing the number of teachers and administrators of color within independent schools. And we are excited to welcome this evening some colleagues and friends that I have gotten to know over the years. They will be sharing a little bit about their own individual experiences. What's it like to be a person of color? What's it like to be you as a person of color in an independent school? You'll hear some of their experiences. We have some questions. We welcome the opportunity for those of you that are joining us live to submit questions directly to me using the chat feature. And for those of you that are viewing virtually, just know there will be many other workshops and webinars that we will offer throughout this process on the road to February 26th, which is the actual day of the job fair from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. As always, jobfair@nysais.org is the way to reach me, and I welcome the opportunity to support you in your process. And now, without further ado, I'm going to invite my colleagues, friends, and tonight's panelists to introduce themselves. I'm going to ask Julie Choi to begin, then Workia Duncan, Dr. Duncan, and then Ramon Javier, and then we'll dive into the questions. Let's have some fun, everybody. Let's get to know one another, and let's be as supportive as possible to our candidates who are our intended audience this evening.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Julie Choi, and I work at Riverdale Country School in the Bronx. I'm the assistant head of upper school there, and I also do a couple of other things. I teach Japanese language in the language department, and I also oversee our co-curricular program with the activities and the clubs. I have been at Riverdale for a very long time. So I'm going to say 20 years because it's a nice even number, but it might be 21, maybe going on 22. So we're a co-ed school. We have a lower school, a middle school, and an upper school. Our lower school is located on a separate campus about a mile and a half away. And the middle school and the upper school, we share the same campus, although we are different divisions. And we have approximately, I'm going to say 600 students or so in the upper school where I basically live.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Workia Duncan, she, her, hers. I am the head of upper school and the director of equity and engagement at the Cathedral School. It is a K-8 school on the Upper West Side. It is also an Episcopal school for people of all faiths, or if you don't have a standard belief system. And I'm also a parent of a wonderful fourth grader. Yes, I'm nervous that he's going to be in my division next year. I've been at Cathedral for 7 years. And it feels like home. I'm really happy to be there. We have a little under 300 students in the entire school. And originally it was a choir school for all boys. And now it is co-ed, and it's a really great place to be.
Good evening, folks. My name is Ramon Javier. My pronouns are he, him, and él. I identify as Afro-descendiente man. I currently serve as Director of Equity and Inclusion at the Trinity School. I'm in my 6th year at Trinity, and Trinity is a K-12 independent school. We have a connection historically to the Episcopal Church, but we are a non-secular institution. We recognize and acknowledge and welcome all faiths and practices and religions in our community. And Trinity is older than the United States of America. So that's a fun fact about our school. And I've been at Trinity, as I mentioned, I've been at Trinity for 6 years. And I also have the pleasure of serving on the NYSAIS Diversity Committee. And I've been on that committee for 6 years now.
And if I remember correctly, Ramon, you also happen to have other affiliations to independent schools.
Yes, I am a parent to 2 lovely children who attend the Bank Street School. And my wife is also works at an independent school as well. Thank you, Liz.
I know there's more.
I'm also a member of this part, really kind of aged me. I'm a member of Prep for Prep's 11th contingent. So I'm part of contingent 11, it's double digits. And I attended the Hackley School in Tarrytown, New York, which had a 5-day boarding program. And I believe that's it, my affiliations with independent schools.
Thank you. I just wanted everyone to know that there really is a wealth of experience that we're drawing from, not just the number of years of employment within our schools, also just our own lived experiences as parents, as members of committee work that is being done to really further this work at a statewide level, as well as being a parent in one of our, parent or guardian in one of our schools or a few of our schools. So thank you. You've talked a little bit about in describing the schools that you currently work at, what kinds of schools they are. I would be really curious, Workia, if you could speak to just in general, when someone says, what's an independent school? How would you define that? How would you respond to that question?
I absolutely love that question, mainly because I went to parochial schools growing up. I've taught in traditional, public, charter, and parochial, and now an independent school. So when I hear independent, I think of state connections and state constraints that our schools don't necessarily have. That doesn't mean that we don't have standards by which students are learning certain subjects, but it does mean that we're not restricted by those specific standards. Whereas there are some schools who can only teach certain things in a particular grade, we have a freedom where if we're seeing that in 5th grade, for example, typically students only learn these particular math concepts, we have freedom to say, there are ways in which we can introduce some of these other concepts as well, giving the scaffolding they need. And so that's where curriculum is concerned, that's part of it. But where I don't see us as independent is that we still very much listen to parents and community members and needs of students. So it's not a freedom from, but it's a freedom to, or independence to do something.
Thanks, Workia. Julie, Ramon, do either of you have anything to add? If somebody were to ask you the question, how do you define an independent school? What is that exactly?
Well, I agree with everything that Workia just said. And I would add that as far as the freedom is concerned, I think that also extends to the freedom that faculty are afforded in designing curriculum that doesn't exist under restrictions of state. For example, my own kids, they go to public school where we live in Westchester, if anybody's familiar with Westchester County, right outside of New York City. And so I can actually see what those differences are in terms of the types of curriculum that my own kids are exposed to versus the kinds of curriculum and curricula that are basically created by the faculty themselves. And in terms of collaboration, there is a lot more of that in an independent school. So it's a really great working environment.
Thanks, Julie. Ramon, anything else to add before we move on?
Yeah, I would add to what Workia was saying in terms of affiliated with the state, where our schools are connected. If you see the symbol behind Liz, NYSAIS, they're the New York State Association of Independent Schools. So our schools here, all 3 of the schools represented, they're connected to NYSAIS, and that organization, there you go. That organization helps connect schools. It serves for the accreditation process. It ensures that we're meeting standards and effectively that our schools are living the missions that they claim. If we say we're going to do this, NYSAIS works to ensure that we're living up to that mission. So while we're not controlled by the state or the city, we are connected to an accreditation source organization. So it's important to note that as well.
And there's a board of trustees, usually comprised of members of the administrative faculty and staff, depending on what the charters particularly say. Parents are part of the Board of Trustees. There may be professionals who are experts in a particular field. Often those are educators. They're members of the alumni community. And if schools are affiliated with particular faith or religious communities, there may be representation from those entities as well. Ultimately, independent schools charge tuition. Independent schools can be day or boarding. They can be schools that are identified to be for a primary gender. Some schools are for all genders. You look at the schools and the commitment that schools have to educating children from pre-K to 12th grade or K to 12th grade. Some end a little bit earlier, like the Cathedral School. And so the intention is to be a primary school or an elementary school or an elementary middle school. And some schools begin in 5th or 6th grade and continue through high school. And those schools are pre-K through 12 or K-12. Those are the continuing schools. Some are all on one campus. Some are on multiple campuses. And, you know, one of the things that's really important, and I really appreciate bringing up the concept of mission. All of our schools have missions. All of our schools are very clear about what they propose or intend to use as their guiding light to educate young people to be leaders that go out into the world. And that's a really important part because the mission and their pedagogical praxis actually informs the ways in which teaching unfolds in the school, the way collaborations unfold. And, you know, ultimately we want healthy, vibrant, actively engaged learners who are taking agency with their voice, who understand and have developed a level of empathy and compassion for themselves and for one another, and who are ready to take on whatever the world, you know, whatever the world provides for them, while they're a student and certainly beyond. And you know, strong, vibrant, young leaders, I think universally the mission statements of our schools all sort of speak in some way to that. We are really excited about the concept of independent schools. And I have to ask, so Ramon, you know, let's start with you. You were a student in an independent school through Prep for Prep. Tell me a little bit about the process for you to consider independent schools as a student, then as a parent, and as an employee, because you've got this 360 perspective that's really valuable. At the conclusion, I'm going to ask Julie to speak to the choice you've made to be at a school for the number of years that you've been, and a little bit about that choice and that professional journey. And then Workia, I'll ask you the same question as well. So Ramon, kick us off.
Well, Liz, I don't know if I have much of a choice because once I got into Prep for Prep, my mother told me that I was going to the Hackley School. Like once I got into the school, that's where she told me that I was going. But it was, you know, I was at the Mahal School, which was on 131st and Convent Avenue, and we didn't have a gym, we didn't have a dining room. We had a gym dining room, and it served multiple purposes, and you know there were limited resources, but there was a lot of amazing teaching and learning happening. And so the opportunity to take some of the amazing teaching and learning that I was experiencing at Mahal and then take it to a place like Hackley, which at the time was over 100 acres, a baseball field, a football field, a separate gym, a separate performing arts center. And then it offered me this boarding experience, which frankly offered our family a little bit of relief because there was one less person in the apartment. So it really served a lot of different purposes for me. And then there were just so many opportunities presented to me as a student at the Hackley School. Again, great teachers and access to just a bunch of different resources, which really shaped the trajectory of my life. Post-college, you know, I graduated college in 1999 and they were just handing out jobs for whatever you wanted to do. So I tried a bunch of different fields, eventually went to law school and decided that wasn't for me. I knew I wanted to work with kids. I wanted to work in education. I'd been doing it in the summers throughout college. And so, so the opportunity presented itself to go back and work at Prep for Prep. And so I worked at Prep for about 4 years, and then the TEAC fellowship. And Prep and TEAC are both education access programs that are connected to independent schools. So I had this experience of serving the students who were going to independent schools who had similar backgrounds as me, and supporting them from the outside. And then there was a curiosity for me in terms of how do I get on the other side, right? Like I think it's time for me to actually work in a school. And ironically enough, the first school that I worked at was a charter school, which is where I met Workia, Dr. Duncan, working at KIPP at their high school, helping to found their high school. And that was a really good experience for me as an educator to step outside of what I've known for a long time, which was independent schools, and be in that setting. And I worked at KIPP for 3 years. And what I found at the time, this is not the case now, was that equity and inclusion work wasn't necessarily happening there. It was happening more in independent schools. And I say ironic because the populations are so different demographically, from a charter school in Harlem to an independent school in Brooklyn and the Upper West Side. And so the desire to do this kind of work that wasn't happening at my school when I was an independent school student, it felt like a calling to kind of go and do that work in an independent school. And so the opportunity came up at Packer, and then at Trinity. And that work has been challenging. It's been really rewarding. And it really kind of fuels me to do this equity work in this setting, especially for all the students, but really supporting our students and families of color, so they can maximize the full opportunity that is an independent school. In terms of being a parent, having seen the small class sizes, the additional support that all the students receive. My wife and I, who's also a graduate of an independent school, boarding school, we wanted that for our kids. And we were able to do that through a program called Early Steps to help get our kids into independent schools early on. And we found, when I do admissions talk, I always tell folks, don't find the best school, find the best school for your family. And we look for the best school for our kids, and we found that. So the journey for me has gone from being a student and having no idea what independent schools are, zero, through Prep for Prep, really seeing the benefits and some of the challenges in independent schools, and then kind of being called back to education and to serving the students and to doing equity work in that setting, and then wanting to offer the same opportunities to my kids.
Thank you, Roland. That was really interesting to hear. So I also did not serve with independent school. So I grew up in central Massachusetts in a small town and went to parochial school. And I really had no idea that I would become an educator. In my mind, I was going to go to college and I was going to major in poli-sci and maybe become a lawyer. But the college experience, allows for a lot of self-reflection. And so along that journey, I was very lucky. I found a passion in Japanese. And so that ultimately led me to Japan, and I lived there for about 4 years. I was doing some teaching there on a program. And when I came back to the States, this is so coincidental in many ways when I look back, but at the same time, I want to say it was meant to be. Moved to New York City for the first time, had never been here. My best friend from high school said, come to New York City and live with me. I said, sure. So I did. And I needed a job. So I walked around Manhattan because I was young and didn't know any better, miles and miles and miles, and would just walk by these big buildings and see people, professionals walking into these big buildings. And I wondered, I wonder what they're doing. Where are they going? And I discovered that they were all in finance, in the financial world. I didn't have a background in finance, but I was curious. And I'm also very persistent. And so ended up actually in finance. I was working something called REITs, Real Estate Investment Trusts, and working as an analyst. And that had a lot to do with research and writing, which I loved. And after a year, I knew this was not the job I was going to wake up to, wanting to go to every morning. In fact, I knew if I spent any more time in that kind of environment, that I probably would lose my spark, my curiosity, my passion. And out of the blue, I get a phone call from a headhunter. And I think it was Carney Sando, but I can't remember because this was a long time ago, asked me, hey, we have your resume, your CV, and would you be interested in working at an independent school outside of Boston, teaching Japanese? Because someone who had planned to teach, I think they lost their visa status. And so they were really desperate to find somebody. And I figured that's the only reason I got that call. And I said, you know what? Fate. It's fate. I get this call. I have to say yes. And the love that I developed for being in the classroom and for working with kids and for working with like-minded colleagues, it just grew and grew and grew. And so then I had to, for personal reasons, move back to the city. And I got a job at Riverdale Country School. Again, Riverdale is in the Bronx, but it's in the northern Bronx. So it has a kind of a suburban feel. We have a very large campus, beautiful actually. I started working as a full-time teacher, and independent schools, people, especially people of color, and I think that we'll probably get into this a little bit later, we end up wearing lots of different hats. And I'm a yes person. Can you do this? Yes. Can you do that? Yes. And I developed, again, more love and more passion for all of the things that were available. And so that's really why I've stayed at Riverdale for so long, because I've had so many different opportunities to grow and to follow the pursuit of interest, all for the purpose of really, at the end of the day, making the students' lives better. And, you know, as far as DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, all of the work that the individuals do at my school and that we do collaboratively, it's with the purpose of making each and every single student's lives better. And so that's part of a big part of why I continue to be at the school. And I feel like I have a responsibility to work and to move into administration. No one forced me to do it. And I don't like to think of myself as somebody who, you know, is going for the title. You know, I need to have that title. I need to have that accolade. You know, that's not really me, but things at my school were able to fall together such that I have an opportunity to exercise some influence and to work collaboratively, again, you know, with lots of different people there. And it doesn't really matter what my title is, you know, every day is really about what can we do to move forward and what can we do to make progress at the school.
Thanks so much, both of you. Akia,
Thank
about
you. So I am not a yes person. I've been a no person for my whole life. My great-grandmother was a teacher. My grandmother was a teacher. My mom was a teacher up until 2019. So I was not going to be a teacher. I went to school because I was going to be the first Black woman Supreme Court justice. And I
hear they're hiring, I'm just saying.
Right. But when I started pre-law, I was like, oh, all of this is corrupt. I don't know if I want to do that. And so I went to divinity school because I'd been fighting church since I was in church. And I figured, hey, you're going to have to keep me in class while I ask all these questions, because that's kind of what I'm paying you for. But then when I was done with divinity school, I said no to ministry because, corrupt too. Then I went into municipal bonds because I figured I could help states and cities help people to get housing and do better infrastructure. And I did that for about 1.5 years and realized that I was not really helping people. And for some reason that bothered me. And so I went to a job fair for traditional public schools, and I got a job teaching 2nd grade. And I didn't know that what I was running away from was something that I had to do. After teaching in traditional public schools, I eventually met Ramon, like you said, in a charter school. And I was there for 10 years, being, again, a no person, saying that you might not want to do certain diversity, inclusion, proper history teaching. Guess what? I'm going to do that anyway. Just close my door and figure it out. But sometimes if you're fighting for a long time and you get tired of fighting, you decide you want to do something else. And so I remember July 2015, I was redoing my resume on my sofa with a friend of mine. And she said, if you could put something just into the universe or type it into Google, what would your dream job be? And so I was like, I guess diversity. So I put in diversity and up pops a job in LinkedIn. But this is the funny thing. The job description was not supposed to be on LinkedIn. And so for the 30 minutes that it was on LinkedIn, I happened to submit my resume. I go for the first round of the interview, and there's nothing that says I have any background with independent schools, because I didn't. I was in parochial schools growing up. And I was the second resume. How did I know that? My resume was upside down. It had 102 on it. And in red letters, it said, might not work out, but let's see. 7 years later, I am now Director of Equity and Engagement and the head of upper school there, which is our middle school, 5th through 8th grade. My husband was the one who had the experience with independent schools because he went to Friends Seminary or Friends in Locust Valley from 6th through 12th grade. And I can say, similar to what Ramon said, finding the best place for your family. Only one of my children has been a part of independent schools. The other 3 had to go other places because they were very much like me, just saying no to everything. They like the experience of learning, but not necessarily the structure. This child of mine does very, very well at this specific independent school because of the type of person he is. And I have to say that I am very grateful for the independence of independent schools, and specifically the one that I'm part of, because it teaches you that there is a light that you can consistently spark in children, and that it doesn't matter where you may have started. I love that Ramon said so many beautiful things about Mott Hall and saying, yeah, the teachers were there, the love was there, the people were there. It does make a difference for children as they're growing to see resources invested in their learning. And that is one of the differences with independent schools than a lot of other schools. The love is still there no matter where you are. But because it is something that we pay into, the resources are also there, so that those things that you might not think children pay attention to, having a separate place to eat and a separate place to play, it makes a difference to them. And I can say that that's one of the differences that I've enjoyed thus far.
Thank you so much, all of you. You know, as many years as I have known you, and as many moments as we've been colleagues and working and attending conferences and sitting alongside one another and learning together, I so appreciate this moment and just listening to your stories. And I'm just reminded that part of what makes these human connections really important is just listening and remembering that everybody does have a story, and that if we give each other the time with very little prompting, it's really just a way to really learn even more and to really practice those active listening skills. You know, so I just want to say thank you to all of you in particular for sharing and for, you know, offering your experiences. I would love to hear a little bit about where have some of the challenges been for you. You might have alluded a little bit in how did you actually join independent school communities. If you have, you know, let's be candid. There are challenges everywhere. There are challenges in every role that any of us have ever been in. So if you're in a predicament where immediately you're like, oh, where do I begin? Let me tell you now, just pick one. Just pick one that you think will illustrate for our audience. Challenges are going to exist everywhere, and there isn't a challenge that is insurmountable, that you can't find a way to figure out, either through a collaborative colleague, a supportive, parent, the relationships with students, professional development, being seen and encouraged to pursue something, anything along those lines. I would love to hear first from Julie, and then Workia, and then Ramon. So professional, a challenge.
Okay, I was hoping you weren't going to call on me first, but you did. So challenge. So there are, and there have been lots of challenges. I can't paint the perfect rosy picture that I would like to, because sometimes I do feel like, I'm in the perfect place, but that's not an everyday feeling. I'm going to say challenge. I've been at Riverdale for a very long time, and I've seen a lot of the progress that we're still continuing to make. There have been some very difficult challenges, I think, for the school and for the student body and for the faculty and administrators. For me, I think that not being able to see myself, my face reflected in the administrators, in the administration, when I first started working at Riverdale, was a challenge. That's not to say that people who did not look like me or people who were not administrators of color were not allies. That's right now in my mind more about not understanding and not internalizing that I could be successful in independent schools, that I could move into different areas that were available for me to move into, that I could think about what my professional career might look like down the road. It was not just a given that I could just do it in my mind. And so a lot of that is, personal struggle. And I'll be honest with you, there are moments when I still feel that way. And I have to fight that. And I have to seek support from the people who are around me. I do need validation, just like the kids need validation. I need those encouraging words. I need to build confidence, again, just like the kids need to do. And just as we know how to support the kids to be able to do that, I have to remember that I too need that. And so now I've become more active in seeking out that support. And I don't think I was that person when I first started working at Riverdale. So that's, a growth, I think, over the challenge or the challenges that I felt.
Thank you, Julie. So while I was in the United States, because I also live in Liberia, I grew up in a place called Lefrak City, and the nickname is Iraq. So there you had to be urgent about everything. So I would say that what has been most frustrating or the biggest challenge is liberal incrementalism, and how there is this expectation that it's not as bad as it used to be in some areas. And so there should be an innate gratitude that at least it's not that bad. We'll get to better, but it can't be at this very moment because there are other things that have to take, or there are other things that we are choosing to prioritize. And so that's the thing that's been most frustrating, because for me, this work, and when I say this work, it is the complete educating comprehensively of children. So it's not just math, not just reading. It is knowing our collective histories, knowing what it took to build these schools, on whose backs the schools have been built, even if it wasn't built for them. And that there's still sometimes a resistance to not only admit that, but to do the complete belonging, can be very frustrating.
I'm gonna add to some of what you both said. When I think of the trajectory of DEI work in particular in independent schools, at least in New York or this area, in my experience, we've gone from diversity, right, which was increasing numbers, it's increased numbers. And then the numbers did go up, right? You have programs like ABC, you have programs like Prep for Prep, Team Fellowship, Rainier Scholars in Seattle, Stepping Stone in Boston, whatever, all the education access programs. And then families making that push. And then the move was towards tolerance, right? Let's tolerate each other, tolerate each other. And frankly, who wants to be tolerated? Then the move went to multiculturalism, right? Let's celebrate our differences and let's celebrate our culture and the food and the clothing. And then the move went to equity and inclusion and social justice. And now we have words like belonging. And these are important, I think, markers when you're thinking about this work in independent schools. It's indicative of the growth. And it's also, I think, one of the frustrating things in the sense that we know what we have to do. We can keep changing the name, we can keep changing the theory behind it, but we're always trying to make sure that folks feel included, that they feel a genuine sense of belonging. And when we say belonging, that means that we're partners, right? We get to co-create and make demands on the institution. And so I think the challenge for me has been, kind of a newfound sense of urgency, right? When this is something that's always been urgent. This is not newly urgent. This has always been urgent. And then the kind of continual evolution of the concepts when, again, I think the needs are clear, right? Let's make space for everyone. Let's allow folks to be, for it not to be so risky to be your authentic self, with the ultimate goal of being able to leverage all of the resources that are available when you enter these schools, right? If you can't feel that genuine sense of belonging, that genuine sense of, I can be my full self here. When I say be my full self, I don't mean like sweatpants, a hoodie, and I mean like internally, like who you are as a person. If you can fully be that, then we know the research shows that the educational outcomes are way more positive if you're able to do that. And so part of and I'll repeat this, I think the frustration is kind of the evolution of the titles and the names, and we know what the work is. Let's just do the work.
Thank you. And I want to get a little more granular, and I want to get in the same point of being granular. I want to invite you all to take it one step further in terms of speaking from your own experience. And just so everyone who's viewing this and understands, we do two. What's it like to be you as a person of color in an independent school? Because each one of these individuals, quite frankly, is speaking from their own experience. They're not speaking for everybody who self-identifies like they do, et cetera. So we may hear, if you join us in the second one later this month, you might hear completely different answers to the same questions because everyone's lived experience might be different. And some of that is about the school, some of that is about where each person is professionally and so many other factors. So I have to ask you all the question, how do you individually handle the resistance? There's been an incredible backlash. We all are witnessing it. We are experiencing it in newspapers. We're seeing it, and coupled with the backlash, wherever it's coming from and whatever the reasons are, that's coupled with sort of a lack of urgency to be responsive in a way that maintains and holds schools accountable to their stated missions. So how are you handling that? What do you see as sort of your individual best practice to be able to come to work each day and be, who you are, doing what needs to be done, because we've all got kids in our schools and we're there for them. So I'm going to invite Ramon. Please speak first, Workia second, and then Julie, you'll be third if you want to add something at the end. And by all means, panelists, if one of you says what you were going to say, you can happily just say what they said, and we're good.
I found out that I've been one of the folks that during the pandemic, it was really beneficial for me in a lot of ways. And I say that fully understanding the devastation that the pandemic has caused in many people's lives. And the reason that it was so helpful is it really forced me to center my mental health. and my spiritual well-being. And it really forced me to do that. There was just so much time to reflect, right? And really think about what was important and what was valuable. And what I was able to do, and I recommend this for everybody, is being able to draw a clear distinction between what's important to you at work and what's important to you outside of work, and being rigorous about the demarcation between the two, right? So I refuse to bring work home, and I mean all of it, right? I'm gonna get my work done. I'm gonna get it done in the building, and I'm gonna think about my work because I love it. But when I come home, I'm home. I'm papi, and I'm a husband, and I'm a son, and a brother, and all those things. And it's I feel like I'm preaching, but it's just been so spiritually healing for me to be able to make that distinction, because we can attach so much value to our work. And when your work is about affecting institutional change in institutions like mine that are older than the United States of America, much older, right? The school was founded in 1709. The task is daunting, right? It seems insurmountable. And if you've attached your self-worth to achieving that institutional change, you're going to feel like a failure every day, right? And so I say the second step for me was being really clear about, okay, what am I going to work on this year? So for me this year, it was really focusing on creating what we're calling a collective learning series, right? Really holding space where folks in our institution, we can use their experiences for the purposes of our collective learning. And that's a big goal for me across stakeholder groups, across divisions. And we've been working towards doing that. And so being really kind of like granular with the goal, thinking big picture, how can this serve the institution? How can this serve the families? But then what am I going to do? That's also been really helpful, because the insurmountable nature of the work that I'm tasked with can be overwhelming. And I refuse to do that. I will no longer engage, allow that sense of the daunting nature of it to kind of overwhelm me. I refuse to. And so for me, I would say what I would offer is being rigorous about valuing and protecting your self-worth and your mental health. And I would say that across any industry and any field. It's been really helpful for me.
Thanks, Ramon. For me, it's kind of two-pronged. One, I love what education and extra information can do to somewhat change perspective. I don't necessarily go into any conversation saying, I want you to think differently. What I usually say is, let me provide you with information you may not have had before. Do with it what you will, and maybe your perspective changes. And the information I usually start with is my own personal story. You can refute what anyone feels about something, but you cannot refute what I actually endured myself. And I have learned to detangle the shame that I may have felt about my experiences because of how I grew up, where I grew up. And now I understand it as things that happened to me, not who I am. And so if I am speaking about growing up in poverty, I make them smell what that smelled like. Let them see what it's like to walk up certain stairs, hoping that you're not stepping in a puddle of urine. Let them think about what it may have felt like for a child to walk on and onto something that may have been intended as a playground, but there are crack vials there instead. And asking people, is that what families wanted for their children? Or is that something that was happening to certain neighborhoods, and who benefited from it? Who was hurt by it? Just asking questions. And if in those questions your mind can change, great. If it doesn't change, then you can never unhear what I've said. And you can never say that you didn't have certain information. And so for me, in the same way that Ramon was saying, it's very, very hard to change the institution. I'm not trying to change the institution. I'm trying to get one more person than yesterday to hear something they didn't hear and let them tell someone else. And hopefully then all of us together end up making a new institution.
Okay, so I'm going to just start by saying, yes, I agree with everything that's been said. And I would like to add something a little bit different from my perspective so that you know a little bit about me. My way of dealing with conflict or challenge was very much the problem must be solved now. We must solve that problem now, no matter how long it takes. The decision must be quick. I have stepped very far away from that. And I think that that has actually helped me in terms of handling that backlash, that you talked about, Liz. How to calm and center myself, like you, Ramon. Probably not doing as good a job as you, but I'm working on that for sure. Listening. I've always considered myself to be a good listener, but there are actually many different ways to listen. And it really feels to me like a skill that I just must constantly keep working at. Really listen and really hear. And then be strong and firm in my beliefs. So whatever that backlash is, instead of listening to the point where I can be convinced that these other narratives are the correct narratives, that there's a point at which I have to decide for myself, you know what? I have a very strong belief and I am not going to be swayed. I will listen for sure, but I'm going to be intentional in how I respond to the backlash and to the challenges and to the obstacles. And all of that, it has to happen sort of together and almost organically. And that's really one of the reasons why I've stayed at my school, because all of that takes time. And I feel like I've been able to work on it and cultivate it. And I've had support for that. And we can't forget, I have to think about, first person here, I have to think about the allies. I have to always think about who are my allies. I always have to think about bringing people in and not keeping people out. Even if I feel like I've been kept out, I can't react to that in a negative way. I still have to think about bringing people in. And our students have to be at the center of my belief system. They have to be at the center of all of the decision-making that happens, whether I'm a teacher in the classroom or an administrator, in meetings, making decisions about school policy.
Thanks, Julie. Ramon, I have a sense that you had one more thing you wanted to just add.
I did. There are, I can't remember who's frames it, right? If you're affecting change, they're going to be 20% of the people who are with you, right? They're the choir. They're 20% of the people that you're never going to change. They don't care. They don't agree with you. That's never going to happen. And then there's that 60 in the middle. That's 60% that's open potentially to change. And I've really tried to focus on that 60%. And not to say that I don't care about the other 2 percentages. The middle is where I'm going to expend most of my energy and supporting the 20 that's already kind of rocking with me. But then also grounding everything in the mission, right? You have a mission statement at your school for a purpose, and grounding everything in that mission, everything. So everything that I do in my work at Trinity, that I did in my work at Packer, was related to the mission, because I wanted to be able to say, but I'm doing what the school says it wants to be. This is what the school says it is. So I'm doing the work connected to that, right? So I'm helping us live our mission. Don't you want to live our mission too? Isn't it what you signed up for as well? And so that's been a helpful approach for me in addressing the backlash. And then also, Liz, I think with time and experience, understanding that there will probably always be some backlash. There will always be people that don't agree with you, that aren't on board, and just making your peace with that and understanding I'm always going to listen to you. And I may not agree with you, and we may not do what you want to do, but I will always listen to you. And look at the mission statement. This is why I'm doing this, because the mission statement says that. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much. So, in the time that we have left, each of you has been a candidate for a position. You've been in a classroom, you've worked with parents, you've worked with other colleagues, you've certainly supported and witnessed the incredible growth and development of our young people and our alums of the school. you are, you're in administrative positions. So there's a wealth of experience that you all sort of hold. And I'd like to tap into that and ask you, what advice would you offer someone who is beginning this process, or who is at the point where they are seeking to join our schools or to transition from a school, from one independent school to another? What advice would you offer? And I'm going to start, just so everybody listens. One of the primary differences between all the different kinds of school is listen to the language and the ways in which my colleagues are responding to questions. Listen to the choice of words. It's important to understand when we talk about mission, if you don't really know what that means, jobfair@NYSAIS.org. I am happy to speak with you, to support you, to ensure that you are most prepared. Visit websites. All of that are some of the givens. What other advice would you offer candidates, particularly candidates of color, who are interested in transitioning from one school to another, or entering our schools at this point? And I will ask Workia to go first, Julie second, and then Ramon.
Thank you. I would ask schools what some schools usually ask us. For example, what do you feel is your best quality that can't necessarily be experienced in other schools? I would ask about the difference between what they advertise about belonging and what people who are actually in the school would say about it. I would ask if the people that are DEI professionals, are they actually at the administrative table, or are they teachers who are doing several jobs, and so they don't necessarily have authority to make positive change? And I would definitely ask, like, what questions you really want to know the answers to. Why? Because transitioning into a school is challenging as transitioning out of a school. It takes something out of you. And so find out as much as possible before you sign whatever contract. Not that you can't get out of whatever, but that's not something you necessarily want to do. If there are questions you get answered in advance, ask them all.
Okay, so in addition to those words of wisdom, I would add three things. Talk about what culture you are looking for. Talk about what your strengths are in terms of the environment, and how you can grow. I would ask, what support systems are in place at the school? I think that's really important. It would be good to get very, I think, clear answer to that, especially support systems for new faculty. If you're new, first time, not just as a teacher or as an administrator, whatever the role may be, are you mentored? And if so, is it a formal mentorship? How long are you going to be mentored? You know, what are those relationships really like? And then I would ask, what does feedback at your school look like? So as somebody who enters the school, how will I know if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing? How do I know if I need to make changes? And ask very specific questions about that system at the school.
Y'all just got blessed. That was great. What I would add to that is, and I get to interview a lot of folks in my role. One of the things I'm looking for is, what's the person's story? Do they know their story? And how are they incorporating their story into their work? I don't believe that you walk into a classroom and you leave yourself at the door. I don't believe you walk into a building, you leave yourself at the door. You may hide stuff, you may be protective of certain things, but those things are walking into the building with you. Like I tell my wife, I'm like, oh, the Dykeman came out of me because I grew up in Dykeman. And so being clear about your story, and how your story connects to the work that you want to do at that institution. I think it's too painful to deny parts of ourselves. I understand the need to protect ourselves, but to try to erase it or eliminate or pretend like it's not there, that to me sounds painful. And so having clarity as to what's your story and how does that connect to the work that you're doing so that you could do it fully and authentically and passionately. And then making sure to what Julian and Workia added, that the institution that you're applying in a position for, that you can do that there. So you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. And part of what I would advise you is when you're interviewing them is really thinking about, okay, the person in my story, how would that play out here? What would that look like in this space?
Thank you all so very much. I would like to add, looking for a position, looking for a new role, transitioning careers, looking for a job is a job in itself. Stay organized. Make sure that you follow up, that you are very detail oriented. When people offer help and assistance, you've heard me repeatedly say, if I can be helpful, job fair at NYSAIS.org. Everyone who's listening, 27 years ago, I've been in independent schools and I was a job fair candidate, and I've been in every role. And I can tell you that I have lots of wisdom that I'm eager to offer, to support. And if I don't have the answer, I have lots of people in my extended network that I truly value, that I could ask, hey, I got a question, or can I connect you with someone who's got a question that I don't know the answer to. Part of this independent school that makes us unique, and I don't mean like one independent school, I mean all of our schools, is that we all really work very hard to be connected and to be supportive of one another. And that's an incredible gift. So when people offer help and assistance, there's a level of authenticity that is informing that offer. And it's an invitation for you to certainly take advantage and follow up. Friends, our time is up. I just want to say a few things. First and foremost, this is the first of many webinars that we are offering. If you identified just a few, and now you're super curious about the others, we're going to talk about career transitions from, we heard about finance, municipal bonds, working in the charter schools and in educational access programs, and the transition. So you heard some of that information this evening from our panelists. There will be specific webinars dedicated to career transitions, to transitioning from public, parochial, charter, and higher ed institutions into independent schools. We're going to talk about resume do's and don'ts. That's on Sunday. We have one that is specifically about understanding the virtual hiring process and what to expect. And the very last webinar that we will offer is an opportunity for a new set of colleagues to talk about what it's like to be them living and working in these schools. So there's lots of opportunity for you to learn about how to best prepare. It is an investment in yourself. I recognize it is time. They are each webinar you can watch at your own leisure, and they will be available on the NYSAIS website. Please, if you have not registered for the job fair to be held on Saturday, February 26th from 10 to 2 p.m. It is virtual through Brazen as the platform. By all means, please make sure that you complete that process. Don't wait till the end. This is one of the things, invest in yourself. Make sure that you have done everything that you can to prepare, and know that we are here to support you. I know I certainly am. I want to thank my colleague George and my colleagues at NYSAIS for your continued support and behind the scenes tech efforts. Of course, Workia, Julie, and Ramon, it is a pleasure. I've learned so much about each of you, and it has just deepened and elevated my respect for you as colleagues and as friends. I really appreciate each of you incredibly. Those of you that have joined live, thank you so much for being here and for your questions. And those of you that are watching, at your own leisure. We hope that we've answered and given you just a sense of what these three individuals experience, and their incredible sense of purpose in being extraordinary educators at a time where we can't say enough good things about educators and certainly leaders trying to guide through the global health pandemic and the ongoing systemic racism that is also part of our lived experience. So I thank all of you. I am grateful, and I look forward to the next time we're all together. Stay healthy, stay hopeful, and stay focused, everybody. Have a good evening. Thank you.